What happens when someone admits to a 40-year lie on live television, and Dr. Phil suddenly tells everyone to stop filming? I need everyone to stop. Stop the cameras. Stop recording right now. Dr. Phil's voice sliced through the air, sharp and deliberate. The studio froze. The guest sitting across from him was trembling, tears falling as they spoke 7 words that changed everything. I've been lying for 40 years. What unfolded next would become one of the most unforgettable moments in television history. The room went completely silent. The audience, usually full of energy, sat motionless. Production staff exchanged uncertain glances. Dr. Phil never stops recording. In over 2 decades of broadcasting, with thousands of confessions, confrontations, and emotional breakthroughs, he had never once called for the cameras to stop. But this time was different. 72-year-old Margaret sat in the guest chair, her hands shaking as she clutched a faded envelope she'd kept for 4 decades. She had come with her daughter Linda, who believed they were there to talk about communication issues. What Linda didn't know was that the conversation was about to change her entire life. Dr. Phil, however, already knew. He had read the pre-interview notes. He knew what that envelope contained, and that this wasn't going to be just another episode. The show had begun like any other. Margaret and Linda walked out to applause and took their seats across from Dr. Phil. The audience smiled, expecting a typical mother-daughter discussion, perhaps about misunderstandings or missed birthdays. So, Margaret, Dr. Phil began softly, you reached out because there is something you need to tell your daughter, something you've been carrying for a long time. Margaret nodded, unable to find her voice. Her fingers traced the edge of the envelope resting in her lap. Linda placed her hand on her mother's. Mom, whatever it is, we'll get through it. That's why we're here, she said gently. Margaret looked up, her eyes filled with years of regret. Linda, I need to tell you something that will change everything you think you know about our family. Dr. Phil leaned forward, his expression turning from calm curiosity to deep concern. This wasn't staged emotion. It was raw and real. Take your time, Margaret, he said quietly. When you're ready. Margaret drew in a shaky breath. Linda, you always wondered why you never met your father, why I never spoke about him, why there were no pictures. Linda nodded slowly, tension tightening her shoulders. You said he left before I was born, that he wanted nothing to do with us. I lied, Margaret said, her voice breaking. I lied about everything. The audience leaned forward. Dr. Phil stayed silent, eyes locked on Margaret. Your father didn't leave. He never even knew you existed. Linda's face went pale. What do you mean he didn't know? Margaret held the envelope tighter. I was young, scared, and pregnant. My parents, your grandparents, told me that if I told him, they'd disown me. They said he wasn't good enough. They made me choose between him and them, and you chose them. Linda whispered, realization washing over her. I did, Margaret admitted softly. And I've lived with that decision for 40 years. Watching you grow up without a father, hearing you ask about him, and lying every time. The studio was silent again. Margaret, Dr. Phil said carefully, is he still alive? Margaret nodded, tears flowing freely. Yes. He's alive, and he never stopped looking for me. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of aged letters, yellowed with time, some with stamps from decades ago. These are from him? Linda asked, barely above a whisper. They are, Margaret replied. He wrote to my parents' address for years, begging to know if I was okay, if the baby was okay. My parents hid every letter. They never told me. Linda lifted one of the fragile pages, her hands shaking as she unfolded the letter, finally reading her father's words for the very first time. Her eyes moved carefully across the faded words written 4 decades earlier by a man she had never met. Her father. Dear Sarah, it began. Sarah was Margaret's maiden name. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I have to try. If there's a baby, our baby, please let me know. Please let me be a father. I don't care what your parents think. I love you. I love our child." The letter was dated 3 months after Linda was born. Inside the box were more letters, from when Linda turned 1, 5, and when she started school. Each one carried the same plea, a wish to connect, a request for a chance to be part of her life. "How did you find these?" Linda asked, her voice trembling. "When your grandmother passed away last year," Margaret said quietly, "I found them in a box in her attic. Every letter he ever sent. She kept them all but never gave them to me. Never told me he was trying to reach us." Dr. Phil stood up slowly and walked toward the edge of the stage. He looked at the audience, then back at the two women. His tone was calm, but heavy. "Margaret, why tell Linda this now and after 40 years? Margaret met her daughter's eyes. "Because 3 weeks ago I found him. He's alive. He's 74. He never married, never had other children. And when I called him, do you know what he said first?" Linda's tears streamed freely now. "He said, 'Is my daughter okay? Please tell me my daughter is okay.'" The audience gasped. Some began to cry. Dr. Phil's jaw tightened, a sign his viewers knew well, the one that meant he was trying to hold back emotion. Margaret continued softly, "He wants to meet you. He's wanted to meet you for 40 years. And I'm here, because before that happens, I need you to know the truth. None of this was his fault. It was mine. I'm the one who kept him from you." Off camera, Dr. Phil did something no one expected. Turning to the audience, he said, "We're taking a break. I need to speak with Margaret and Linda privately." The studio murmured in surprise. The show rarely ever stopped. But Dr. Phil had made up his mind. "Please stay in your seats," he added. Then he guided the two women behind the set. The camera stopped rolling. What happened next was never shown on television, but those who were there would never forget it. According to producers, Dr. Phil sat down with both women and spoke from the heart. "Margaret, you've carried this for 40 years. You can't carry it another second. Linda, before you meet your father, you have to decide something. Will you meet him burdened by your mother's guilt, or will you meet him free?" Linda looked between them, confused. "What do you mean?" "Your mother made a choice 40 years ago that she regrets. She let fear and pressure dictate her life. But you don't have to repeat that. You can choose forgiveness, you can move forward. Or you can let this pain destroy what's left of your family." Linda stood up, walked over to her mother, and hugged her tightly. Margaret broke down, sobbing in her daughter's arms. "I forgive you, Mom," Linda whispered. "I forgive you." They stayed like that for a long moment, mother and daughter, releasing decades of pain and silence. When they returned to the stage, everyone could sense a change. The air felt lighter, the tension was gone, replaced by something that looked like peace. Dr. Phil addressed the audience. "What you're about to see didn't happen on camera. We stopped recording because some moments are too personal to be televised. But Margaret and Linda have agreed to share what comes next." He turned to Linda. "Are you ready to meet your father?" Linda nodded, her tears now filled with anticipation, not grief. Dr. Phil picked up his phone. "Bring him in." The studio doors opened. An elderly man walked in slowly, leaning on a cane. His hair was white, his eyes kind. When he saw Linda, he froze. "Linda?" he said, his voice cracking. "Dad?" she replied. He moved faster than anyone expected for his age, crossing the stage to her. They met in the center, holding each other for the first time. The audience wept openly. Crew members behind the cameras wiped away tears. Margaret watched from her chair, witnessing the reunion she had once prevented. Dr. Phil placed a hand on her shoulder and said softly, "You gave her a gift today, the gift of truth. That's the only foundation any relationship can stand on." After the show, Dr. Phil arranged for the family to work with a therapist specializing in family reunification and trauma. He ensured Linda and her father had the tools to rebuild their relationship gradually, and he connected Margaret with counseling to help her release the guilt she had carried for so long. 6 months later, Dr. Phil received a letter from Margaret. Inside was a photo from Linda's wedding, her father walking her down the aisle for the first time. Margaret wrote, "You told me the truth would set me free. I didn't believe it then. I thought it would destroy us, but you were right. The truth didn't ruin our family, the lies did. The truth saved us." That day's legacy reached far beyond one family. In a later interview, Dr. Phil admitted that stopping the recording was one of the hardest decisions of his career. "As a psychologist, I knew that moment needed to be protected. As a TV host, I knew it would make great television. But in that moment, the person in front of me mattered more than the show." When the episode finally aired, with the family's consent, it became one of the most watched in the show's history. But more importantly, it inspired thousands to reconnect with estranged loved ones, to tell truths long buried, and to seek forgiveness they thought was out of reach. The envelope Margaret brought that day, filled with 40 years of letters, now hangs framed in Linda's home. It stands as a reminder that truth, no matter how painful, is always better than the most comfortable lie. And it remains proof that some moments transcend television. They're about humanity, healing, and the courage it takes to finally speak the truth. The lesson from that day remains unmistakable. Lies, no matter how well-meaning, eventually destroy what they were intended to protect. But truth, however painful, holds the power to heal, restore, and rebuild what was once broken. Margaret's decades of deception had taken away Linda's father and denied her father Robert the joy of knowing his daughter. Yet one moment of honesty reunited them all. That is the true strength of truth. It may hurt at first, but its healing lasts a lifetime. 3 years later, the impact of Margaret's confession was still being felt. Linda and Robert had built a bond neither thought possible. They shared Sunday dinners, went fishing, and Robert finally heard all the childhood stories he had missed. Margaret, attending therapy consistently, had learned to forgive herself. "I can't undo the past," she said, during a follow-up segment with Dr. Phil, "but I can make sure our future isn't defined by my mistakes." The show received over 50,000 letters from viewers inspired by Margaret's honesty. Many shared how her story gave them the courage to face their own truths. One woman reunited with the son she had given up for adoption 30 years earlier. A man confessed to his family about a long-lost sibling. A daughter revealed a decade-long addiction she had hidden. Dr. Phil's choice to stop filming that day redefined what it means for television to serve humanity rather than mere entertainment. In later interviews, Dr. Phil reflected on that moment. "People ask why I stopped the cameras," he said. "The answer is simple. I'm a psychologist first, a TV host second. That woman needed compassion, not production. Her daughter needed a safe space, not a spotlight. Some things are simply more important than ratings." The flood of letters became a powerful symbol of hope. They proved that love doesn't expire, even when time or pain tries to erase it. Robert had written those letters to Linda, not knowing if she'd ever read them, but he wrote anyway, because love keeps trying no matter what. That is the real lesson behind Margaret's 40 years of lies. Truth may hurt, but it's the only foundation strong enough to sustain genuine relationships. After their reunion, Robert kept every letter Linda sent him. He carried them in his wallet just as he had carried the hope of meeting her for 4 decades. "I waited my whole life to be called Dad," he told Dr. Phil, "and it was worth every second." This story reminds us that even deep wounds can heal, broken bonds can be mended, and long-buried truths still have the power to set us free.